Welcome, everybody. Black Girl Freedom Week is hosted by the hashtag 1 Billion for Black Girls campaign and Black Girl Freedom Fund, an initiative of grant makers for girls of color. This week showcases what is possible when we abundantly invest in the dreams, power, joy, and leadership of Black girls and gender-expansive youth while working together to co-create a future where they are safe, free, and thriving. Hey, everybody. My name is Jamison Ford. I use all pronouns, and I will be this year's host for your annual Black Girl Freedom Week broadcast. This year, I'm most looking forward to hearing from Odessa Kelly, one of our fantastic panelists you will hear from this afternoon. Not only is she from my home state of Tennessee, but she is a transformative Black and queer voice that young people such as myself deserve to see in politics today. Alongside me are our exceptional ASL interpreters, Andrea Lust and Brenda Terry. Although we are live, this session will be available on our website and YouTube. So if you miss it in real time, you can always come back and watch it later. Let's get ready for our daily giveaway. If you still need to register, please click the link in the video description and register now. That way we can get your prize to you if you win. And to make sure that you are not a robot, type in the word of the day in the chat. Today's word will be engage. Let's get into the lineup for today. Today will consist of the panel Voting, One Path to Just and Liberated Futures with Madison Forney, Denora Getanacho, Odessa Kelly, and Tony Moore. Following that panel, we will see a video from Georgia's CRG featuring Camille Thompson. Are you ready? Let's go.
Everyone, how are you? Welcome to the Black Girl Freedom Week. I am so excited to be here with you all. I am Denora Getachew, the CEO of DoSomething.org, also known as the Democracy Ninja. Today, I'm wearing my sweater just to prove that I'm all in every day. I'm hustling, and I hope that you all too, for Black girls and our freedom. I'm so excited for the conversation we're going to have today, and I want to take a moment just to introduce myself and everyone else. As I mentioned, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of DoSomething.org. We are the national hub for youth activism, a 30-year organization that's really focused on helping young people, fueling them to change the world. I'm a native New Yorker and a mother of three, and I am one who uses all the tools in my toolbox to make sure that I'm advancing change for my community. In my extra spare time, I am chair of the board of Higher Heights for America, a national organization providing Black women with a political home exclusively dedicated to harnessing their political power. Joining me today are Odessa Kelly. Odessa Kelly is an advocate for Black people and the working class anywhere on Earth. I'm like, yes, please. She is working fiercely alongside many allies to redefine the South. In her free time, she loves trolling online extremists and crushing the hopes and dreams of little boys and grown men on PlayStation. That is a full-time job, I feel like. So welcome, Odessa. I am also joined here by Tony Moore. Tony Moore is a proud Atlanta native who pioneered the first Black queer feminist organization at Georgia State University, Panthers for Black Feminism. Tony is currently the executive assistant at Women Engage, which is celebrating 10 years as a social justice and human rights organization whose mission is to build power with and for Black women, femmes, and girls. Tony specializes in oral history and carries a passion for global liberation and Black imagination. And last but not least, we are joined by Madison Forney, who's a senior political science major from Roseville, Michigan, residing in McDonough, Georgia, currently attending Clark Atlanta University, serving as the second-year Dr. Ann Moses Atlanta Fellow for Ignite National, a TED Women Scholar, and an inaugural recipient of the Obama Chesky Voyager Scholarship for Public Service, sponsored by former President and First Lady Obama, the Obama Foundation, and the CEO of Airbnb, Brian Chesky. We are joined today by a dynamic group of women and want to make sure we kick off this conversation. Let me set the stage just a little bit, if I may. As we think about 2024 and what's at stake, and we think about why voting and why our voices matter in the electoral system, I'm just really curious about what we think is at stake, and what issues do we think matter most to Black girls and gender expansive youth. So anybody want to chime in and tell me what's on their mind, what's animating them, as we are 16 days into February, so it's Black History Month, but it's also 10 months, 9 months, depending on the counting and all the elections, from when we'll know who might be in the White House.
I can go ahead and go first.
Go for it, Tony.
So the question is, what's at stake, right?
What's it? Yes.
I think in 2024, what's at stake for Black women and gender expansive people, especially in this country, especially in the South, it's the same as what's always at risk, you know, our reproductive rights, gentrification, seeing labor, you know, different labor rights, and just other things that are a constant. I think sometimes we can kind of get lost in these big moments of upheaval, or, you know, not necessarily upheaval, but just feeling like the election is the end all be all, the presidential election. But a primary focus at Women Engaged is integrated voter engagement, which means that all of these issues are every day, you know, a priority. It's not just at this one pivotal moment that will impact us, but we can also, there's also so much hope, you know. We can also focus our attention on local elections. There are 4 judges, you know, up for re-election in the state this year. We can vote for, you know, people on the school board, superintendents, and, you know, just all of these different candidacies, offices that will have an impact. And I think that's what's at stake, you know. And so keeping that attention, you know, fighting local for what's happening globally. GILI is a significant program. It's the Georgia-Israel Law Enforcement Exchange Program. So APD is being sent to Israel now to train with, you know, soldiers there. So all of these things are connected. When we act locally, that will impact us. So I think that's what's at stake this year.
Thank you for sharing that, Tony. I'm curious for your take, Odessa. 8 million new young people are going to be eligible to vote. What are they going to be thinking about as they head into the voting booth? And I heard we're in a big moment of upheaval. We need to think about integrated, or as I like to say, I do something intersectional components of the work. What do you think is animating voters this year?
Just expand on what Tony said, all the things that they put forward. It's nuanced when we talk about young voters and what people are looking at, right? The thing to go further than what Tony was saying, the things that are at stake are safety, you know, and that's at every scale. If we have, what we've been doing is paying attention and normalizing these toxic behaviors of watching people dismantle systems here and to create normative behaviors out of toxic systems. And that is on a global level. So I think what Tony was speaking about, of like, why would we have a law enforcement going in training in another, you know, in another country, you know, for tactics and measures that are, you know, essentially domestic terrorism that is applied to us here. If you go from that and you think about, you've heard the say that we could possibly lose our democracy, looking at what could be a fascism government, right? That means that you could possibly lose your peace. You know, I don't think people understand what that means. When you talk about that, they don't understand what destabilization means and the wealth that goes in if the United States is to go into a state of fascism, and how that will drastically impact the lives of Black people across the country. I think that when I think about young voters, I think they have a semblance of that. And I also think that they are going to the voting booth, or what is making it difficult for them to go to the voting booth is the silver lining in that we see in our youth. The most of the youth that I know, you know, and I know I'm cute, but I'm 40, you know. So people who are younger than me, they have been intentional. They've been intentional about tending to their mental health. Mental health is mental wealth, right? They've been intentional about unlearning all of these things that white supremacy has taught us. You know, to my LGBTQ family, to my queer family out here, to all the young people that I know, they are very intentional about existing fully as themselves. And right now, we have been in a pattern for umpteen years of having to select between the lesser of two evils and not actually being able to select or elect the individual who fully represents what we want to, represent us. So I think that when I think about youth today, I think there is a really hard choice that they are going to have to make this year, because we are literally between a rock and a hard place if we're talking about presidential politics, and we're in a literal hard place about how do we evolve as queer people, how do we evolve as Black people, how do we evolve as human beings, to move ourselves to where we actually want to be in building a better society.
You're preaching today. You said with your cute self, even though you're 40. I was like, do age and beauty, are they correlated? We all know the phrase about what happens when Black don't crack. So we're all good there. Madison, I want to bring you into this conversation. We not only know that there is a growing majority of young people who are, when you combine Gen Z and millennials, will make up 49% of the electorate this year, so a near majority. But I hear both Tony and Odessa speaking about the top issues that matter. They've mentioned uplifting our democracy and protecting it. They've talked about safety and well-being. They've talked about mental health, a little bit about reproductive health. Anything we're missing? What else do we need to be thinking about? And what should those who are seeking elective office be thinking about when we think about what's at stake for Black voters?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for that question. They mentioned some extremely important points, specifically around foreign policy and how it's affecting us here domestically in the United States, but also the lack of representation. With the statistics you just provided, we should be seeing an increased amount of numbers in the U.S. representatives, the U.S. Senate, but we're not. Women in Congress right now make up less than 30%, and there are only 25 women who make up the U.S. Senate. So we should be seeing, with all these increased numbers, with female voters and gender expansive voters going into public office and taking advantage of those open seats, and not just on the federal level, but also statewide and also locally. Your local elections are extremely critical, impact you the most. Actually, most people don't know, but your local elections will impact you far more than your federal elections will. And so it's important that while we have this momentum around the federal elections, to remember what's happening at home. I know here in the state of Georgia, we have our primaries upcoming, and a lot of young people are excited to vote. So I think we have a lot of momentum around that, and then understanding what the issues are. Climate change is also a huge issue. Waste, water waste, food waste. It's important that we hold our public officials accountable and make sure that we're highlighting these issues, especially around reproductive rights and the health of Black women.
Such key issues, and I thank you for bringing in the climate crisis, because that is a key issue that we've heard. I do something that young people really care passionately about. All of you touched on something that I want to dig a little deeper on, which is a lack of trust in government and elected leaders, right? We are at this pivotal moment where trust in government is at an all-time low, right? According to a recent Pew Research poll, only 2 in 10 Americans trust the government in Washington to do what's right. And what we've heard from young people, more specifically at Do Something, is that 87% of our members say that they don't believe that elected officials take the voices of young people into consideration when they're enacting policy. And yet, we're talking about fascism, right? I'm just going to call it out. Odessa, you threw the word out there. It's in the mix now. What do we do to combat that? Because when I talk to young people, we go and knock on doors, I don't ever hear anyone say, protecting our democracy is the issue that's most important to them. And so how do we think about how we get Black women and femmes who have been harmed by democracy to still participate in the process, but also be ninjas or leaders for it?
I can start off on that. Yeah. Well, language is one of the things. Words have power, and Black women have been doing the work. I think that one of the biggest issues that we have here is the things that we have normalized as being okay. Like, and this is no shot to anyone who went to Harvard, but if you would look at Harvard Business School and what they teach to be good business practices, at the end of the day, it's oppression, because this country was built off of oppression. Capitalism has been like refined off of the backs of our people and oppression. I was going through an old US history book, a textbook, right? It was at the area they were talking about US treaties. And it dawned on me, I had to take a test in the 8th grade about what US treaties are what. And US treaties ain't nothing but certificates of thievery. And they made us take a test on that joint. So we have to think about all the things that we have to unlearn. And that too is even thinking about the two-party system. I ran as a Democrat, and I support Democrats because of the lesser two evils, but I wanted to run and become a part of Congress so I could be a version of a politician that people actually saw themselves in. Right now, what we do is we have a bunch of people at the top, regardless of what party they belong to, who take care of the 1%. And we've got to be honest about that. There is wealth that is matriculating at one level and is not matriculating for anywhere else. Like even to what Matson was just talking about. Yes, politics are local, but for Black people, it's always been national. All the things that we need to even secure the wealth and the land that we have that is governed on a local level, it's got to happen at the federal level. So the work that Black women have been doing is the work that we've been doing since we have been in this country, and that is pushing everyone to do the thing that they're supposed to do, and that is to take care of each other and take care of the things that need to do for us to like to see the humanity in each other. And the reason why I had to give the context to that is because in this work and all the things that we've been doing from the local level to the federal level, school boards, Black women have always been holding it down. I was at a school talking a couple of days ago. The principal didn't know nothing. It was the Black woman who was the secretary that had been running the school for 30 years. It's just what we do, right? And I think, Madison, to the thing that you were talking about earlier, us getting rid of our imposter syndrome and being okay with centering ourselves more and putting ourselves into leadership. We have this whole Me Too movement, and a lot of Black women that felt as though they were erased in that movement. I think if we are ever really going to have an opportunity to save the democracy that we have and then find the space to make it better, we have to center ourselves and start to move ourselves in the importance of like, we have the tools, we have the forthright, we have the intellect, and the gravitas to do what's needed to save this democracy.
Tony, Madison, what are you thinking? How do we make sure that those who've been harmed by, right? Because we have always been the pillar of our democracy and upholding the society, but it's also harming us. How do we make sure we get Black women and femmes back at the table?
I think so. Speaking to what Odessa was saying about peace before, I felt that was really profound. Is that, yeah, we need to uplift, this history of ourselves as leaders, and recognize that that's always sort of been our role. Angela Davis, Fannie Lou Hamer, Dorothy Bolden, Malika Redmond, there are all of these leaders within the South, within the nation, that are Black women that are doing this work because they recognized what they were deserving of, and they were deserving of that peace. So in this sort of climate where there is maybe a distrust, I feel like there has to be also an understanding, or not that there has to be an understanding, but I think that there is an understanding amongst people that violence we're experiencing will not stop just because we want it to stop, that we have to put in, how to say, if we decided tomorrow to disengage, it wouldn't change that every decision being made will still impact my life, whether I engage or not. So it's really just that understanding that our participation, not only does it matter, but it's always been a crucial element of these movements. And that we are doing this sort of engagement because we have to, because there are lives in the bin, there are people that will die, and that's a serious word, and it's the reality. So I think that's just sort of key in getting people to care, is getting them to recognize, the reality of what we're experiencing, and also to get them to acknowledge that power as a part of our reality, is that we are powerful and we are leaders, and that these secretaries and all of these people who are holding down knowledge and doing the organizing work, that their work matters.
Couldn't have said it better myself, right? I think I often talk about the notion that democracy is a full contact sport, and we may not all play in the sport every day or have a role to play. Sometimes we sit on the bench, and I'll call that the self-care time, but we all have to know what our role is in it, right? Getting our own sense of civic identity and then leveraging that to do good. And the power of Black women in particular can't be understated. Madison, I'm curious for your take, right? Because you're on a campus and you're hearing the voice of young people, and there's a lot of the distrust of the system, but also, well, I voted once, and so why do I have to keep voting? Or nothing changed immediately after I took that vote. And some of that, I want to say, has to do respectfully with the role that technology has played in getting us to think more in a slacktivist, like the slacktivism, activist and slacking a little bit at the same time. How do we combat some of that, right? Because I think there's some distrust that's happening through platforms and through the sense of stick-to-itiveness that previous generations had in spades. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, so what I would say are two things, and I'm speaking from the perspective as a 21-year-old senior at an HBCU. So I have a unique perspective as it relates to not only diversity, but also accessibility. And so what I would say as far as the distrust is, when we look back at our ancestors, there are people who were not in the position that we are in today. There was no Zoom, no Google Meets for us to even convene about these conversations. We were out petitioning the community. We were out in the streets, actually doing what we need to do to hold our community accountable. And so what we have to do and what we must do in order to see change, in order to seek progress, is to put ourselves back in those positions of petitioning the community, petitioning the public officials, holding people accountable, make sure that they're advocating for what we need done on our behalf. Just to be completely honest, when we look at both parties, political partisanship has prevailed over the past 30 years, unfortunately, and it has become a situation where it's not just Republican versus Democrat, but it is a situation where, as Odessa mentioned previously, who is the lesser of the two evils? And so there we find ourselves in a conflicting situation. But when we remove that ideology and try to understand from a perspective of who is going to get the work done and what can I do right now to start helping my community advance further, since there are people who may not be able to do what we need to do. For example, there are issues around healthcare. You can't possibly, we operate in a capitalistic society, and you can't possibly imagine for people to go out in the workforce and, commit to this capitalistic society if they cannot take care of themselves. Healthcare is extremely important. So being on an HBCU campus, people having accessibility, cost of living. As a senior, there are a lot of my peers who I know are trying to figure out, should I go home or should I stay in Atlanta where there are opportunities and jobs for me to go and pursue? But the cost of living is just apprehensible. Like it's almost unlivable. You can't live out here for an affordable price and still work a job and still possibly pursue a graduate degree. Black women are one of the most educated individuals in the United States. And so it's important that we hold ourselves accountable and look at where we are today. And remember, our ancestors reflect on what they've gone through, what they've done for us, so that we can continue to press forward and move onward and upward and find solutions to the issues that we're facing today.
I love the point you made there around reflecting back in order to look forward, right? And really thinking about, I often talk about how because our ancestors didn't have access to technology, change took a much longer time, right? And so by way of example, it took 72 years from the convention of Seneca Falls to the 19th Amendment. If tell someone today, you have to wait 72 years for a fundamental right, people would lose their minds, right? And so instead, they're used to waiting 72 seconds, the time it takes to order their dinner via a mobile app. And so how do we get that notion of staying with it and staying the course involved? But I also think you made the point that it is also about what happens after Election Day. We put all of our focus on the lead up to Election Day and going out to vote. Unequivocal. No one's going to hear me say here that voting itself is not important. But what's equally important is showing up the day after the election. Excuse me. And so I just love to hear your take, excuse me, on what are some of the creative strategies that we can use to get the vote out, and how have you seen that be creative and joyful and not just about doom and gloom?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a prime example of getting the vote out. I mean, just having this conversation and being transparent and open about a lot of the issues within our community and that face young Black girls and young Black women, and trying to understand what we can do to press forward, but also doing community engagements and community studies and proposing to public community sit downs and conversations with the community and public officials, the community and the police department, the community and several organizations under like the health, community of health, and understanding agriculture, so that we can bring these opportunities to our community and understand how we can advance forward. So it's about just being a liaison and someone taking the initiative to say, I will get it done. And my peers on this call, on this panel, have definitely shown that they are driven and they're doing the work to do that. And we just need more people. If there were at least 10,000 people like Odessa and Tony in every single state, I guarantee we will be so much further by the time 2030 came around. So it's about just taking that initiative and understanding like we can't sit around and wait for change to happen. We have to go after it actively, continuously, and prevalently. We have to go after it nonstop and make sure that our voices are not only heard, but they're being put to work and is action behind what's happening, and on the federal level, statewide, as well as locally.
Odessa, you can jump in there? Go for it.
Yeah, I love that. Also, too, I think it's crazy. I'm gonna call this creative. A creative thing that we could do is also just tell the truth and be honest. We are used to people talking at us. You know, are you actually really trying to hear me, have a conversation with me, understand my needs? Do you see yourself as an extension of the community, of what I define as community? You know, I run a nonprofit that does social and racial justice work through an economic lens. It's the reason why I ran for office. The reason why I even got into this work is I was desperate to save my own life, working in a community center for so many years. And like I'm living in Nashville right now. It's like white Atlanta, you know. I'm jealous to everybody in Atlanta because I'm in white Atlanta. Anyway, you know, but the housing is insane here. I was doing a that the government that we all deemed as taxpayers was important as a civil service, yet I'm underpaid for the work that I do. How familiar is that for everyone here on this call? Literally underpaid. And now we got AI trying to replace us. Hell, as soon as the robots figure out they're underpaid, they might join us on the picket line too. I don't know. But what I can tell you is that it has been the norm, right? And so we can't just talk to people, you know, in the election year. That's why I appreciate Higher Heights. You know, Higher Heights is talking to people in the year after the election, that next year, getting people ready for the midterms, trying to do all the stressful work to try to be like, I know you got to pay bills. I know your baby daddy getting on your nerves. I know your kids getting on your nerves. I know everything out here is getting on your nerves, right? And I still need you to show up and do your part to vote, right? And I think people appreciate that. We want to see effort. Energy got to match energy. And that's what I mean too. We got to like change these things. You know, we've been told all these cliche things to say about government. Let's be brave and bold enough as Black women, as queer people, as individuals who are really trying to redefine what our community is, especially here in the South, you know, to really like start to set the norm of what that looks like. One of the most creative like GOTV events I went to, or they had 2 years ago, was it was the Black trivia thing. Like they do Black trivia. They had a huge big Black trivia thing, right? What is it? It's got to be 100 feet from where the polling place is. And so basically, they had a bunch of college kids and a bunch of people. They were pulling people over from the streets. And, you know, you went through the Black trivia thing. They had a well-known local person there who was the MC, had a huge mic. He's asking people questions. Everybody and mama can hear the answers. There's funny questions. Then you go in to vote, then you get your prize. You know, I think they said that on spot, they got about 1,500 people to vote, and then they also got about 700 people to commit to registering to vote for the next one. You know, so this is a process, and we have to think about all the steps that we have to do.
I love that. Tony, anything you would add as it relates to creative or joyful strategies to protect the right to vote or get everybody fired up about democracy?
Yeah, so I think there's this through line that we're all speaking of about storytelling. And I think Black women and gender expansive people have been, you know, very pivotal when it comes to that within our communities. Tony K. Bambara said, the role of the artist is to make revolution irresistible. And I think that part of that is this storytelling that involves myth making, you know, using that imagination to, you know, it's not just, when we tell the truth, it's not just to focus on the experiences that we are having, but the experiences that we want to be having, and the future that we want to see. And so when we're getting people out to vote, there is this sort of cultural production and, you know, artist propaganda, all of it. So we have to engage in a cultural production that privileges this truth telling, so that people, you know, like Madison said, that our voices are loud, our voices are heard. And a creative strategy I think that I've seen as it relates to getting people out to vote, so particularly with Women Engaged, there's a very intentional storytelling through story circles, where, you know, Black women and, you know, we use the space to talk about this legacy. So, you know, again, as we said before, there's this history of leadership with Black women. That is a part of our truth telling, you know. All of these things come together so that we can get people excited about what the future looks like, so that people are honest about what they're experiencing now, so that those issues are identified, so that when we're going into voting, we have a personal, deep connection to, you know, what's happening around us. So I think that's what I would add to that conversation. Yes, we have to make memes, we have to make TikToks, we have to do all of this cultural production to get people engaged. And all of those are forms of storytelling. A TikTok is a story, so it's all together.
I love that cultural production. I wonder in particular for young people, right? Do we think that the cultural production feels authentic enough to be engaging, right? Because I think part of what I struggle with, even as in leading Do Something, is the work we're doing performative, right? Do people see through it? And so I'm curious if the cultural production happens too close to election day, as opposed to all year round, right? Democracy being a full contact sport. Do people see through that? And so any thoughts on how to make cultural production and, more importantly, the storytelling feel authentic, sustainable, and engaging?
Ooh, Mr. Nora. I mean, I think there's several different ways to look at it, and like there's no wrong way to answer it. But we did answer the question earlier, you know, like, yes, a lot of people think it's performative. A lot of young people, a lot of Black men have been targeted, and it's very true when they say, regardless of who is in office, you know, it doesn't change how I get to live my life. And that is very true, you know, and I think that is a task that me as a person who's would fall on a Democratic side to say that's on y'all. If Black men or Black people or queer people, young people can't tell the difference between Democrat and Republicans, Democrats, you need to do better, about the people that you say you represent. Again, like the work we do is 24/7. You cannot just show up on 2 weeks before you're supposed to get the vote out. And two, joy is something that's just internal. It has a spiritual connection to it. So if we really want things not to be performative, they have to be able to feel themselves in it. They got to see themselves in it, and they got to hear themselves in it. And when is the last time? Who are the last elected officials at any level? Think about that actually exude that, and where did they come from? 10,000 people nominated me to actually run for a position because I came from the community that they come from. And so like we have to get back to normalizing that. The richest person in your city, in your state, shouldn't be entitled to be the leader of your community. They're good at making money. Doesn't mean that they're good at leading, And so even the things the rubrics and the measuring sticks that we build to say what experience is are things that we need to re-examine if we want to do better about storytelling and for people to find it to be authentic.
Before I move on, Madison, Tony, anything you'd want to add there? I saw a lot of head nodding, but I want to make sure I give you space if you want to say anything on this point before I move forward.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think this upcoming generation of voters really does acknowledge the importance of transparency and storytelling. And we're kind of like the guinea pig generation, honestly, with technology and TikTok and Instagram and understanding all that entails and how far the reach can be. And so I think it is important to make sure that we are advocating and showing up in spaces, not just in November, but in December, January, and also during primary elections.
So Madison, I'm gonna stick with you because you talked before a while back. I remember the things about the role of local elections, right? And so this notion that it isn't just about the presidential election. It isn't just about the federal election. There's so much that can happen at the grassroots level in local communities and in those off-year. There's no off-year election, everybody. Just stop saying it. It's like every election matters. That's where real policies that affect your daily lives, especially that of young people, is happening at stake. And yet we're in this moment of increased like polarization off the charts, right? That I'll be a little bit colloquial on a Friday afternoon, like you don't have the same Kool-Aid on tap I got at home. We can't talk. What is that? What is that about? I don't understand. That's not how you make good policy. That's not how you move the ball forward. And yet we don't see the turnout at the same level in those midterm elections or in those odd year elections. How do we think about what we're building now, this table we're building right now, 10 months out from the election? We're all going to do the work. It's going to be authentic. It's going to be intentional. We're going to uplift stories that are meaningful and transparent. How do we then use that to seed what happens in 2025 when governors and state legislators in New Jersey and Virginia and countless mayors are going to be on the ballot?
Yes, absolutely. The key is to be fervently consistent. Fervently consistency is so important because what's happening is people are being put into appointed positions, people are being put into elected positions, and there's so much political partisan and a lot of trivialized notions and information that's taking place in our society today. And we're missing the point that elections don't just impact us on election day. Elections impact us thereafter, before, after, for our children, for our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and thereafter. And so it is important to stay consistent because you can't expect anything in this world to change if you only go once a year during federal elections. And so with that mindset, we have to understand why statewide elections are important, why local elections are important, because they do come around a little bit quicker than maybe our federal elections. And when I say they're important, I want to be specific and I want to be intentional while I'm saying this. They're important because they affect your water, your sewerage. They impact your education, the type of education your children will receive, what I'm receiving on a state level, earning a higher education. And then also just paying attention to what it means to have accessibility, transportation, grocery stores near you. All of that has nothing to do with the federal election. So be consistent in the federal election, but also be consistent on the local elections. I have conversations all the time with my family about the importance of being on the PTA and advocating for, I have a younger brother, and advocating for him and making sure that he's getting the best education he possibly can as a high school student, and so that he can thrive and be successful. And so it's important that we pay attention to the school board and those elections and the people that we're putting into office that best align with what we want to see for our future generation, because they're coming after us. And so we ourselves with the tools and the knowledge now on how to get involved, going to your local elections, participating in PTA meetings, participating in local elections, making sure you're making yourself aware of what it means to even have accessibility. I mean, accessibility can look different for everyone. So meeting people where they are is what's important, and being fervently consistent.
I was like, is she gonna say it again? Because if not, I'm gonna say it. Fervently consistent. Takeaway of the day, right? Tony, give us something. What do you think we have to do to capitalize on this momentum? Right, we're all gonna do the best we can over the next 10 months, and then 2025 is gonna come. We're gonna be like, I need a break, and it's like, no. So how do we keep the fervently consistent and add to that?
So I think political education is a big element of this, right? Is that people, while we might not, people might not know what the president does on a day-to-day basis, they know that office impacts them, but when we're getting people to engage in these local elections, that political education, again, it needs to be fervently consistent. We need to be educating people on what these local offices do, right? So when there's a book ban, when there's a book ban happening in Florida or, coming up in a state near you, you need to know what office controls that, who has the power, right? I think power is a really, important element of this as well. And also political education, knowing that it goes both ways, right? So when we're educating people on what these offices do, that we also have to educate ourselves on what people care about, right? That when you're talking to people, you're not just talking at them about this election is coming up. Even if it's not the presidency, even if you're being, adamant about this is coming up and this is who's running for this, that you also have to listen and be engaged in that way to know what issues matter to people so that you can direct them to the appropriate offices. And yeah, I think that's how we get people, to participate locally, is to know what they care about and connect them to those issues, because knowledge is power. So
we're going to be fervently consistent. We're going to get some political education. Odessa, what else? How do we keep this momentum going?
Yeah, I'm just going to expand on what Madison and Tony have said. Vote on the issues and the things that matter. Black people, a large majority of the urban cores across this country have been gentrified. Black people usually move to the urban cores for safety. And with that happening, what we have seen is consistent across the majority of where Black people are. Housing is an issue, it's affordability rate. Workforce development is an issue. What are the jobs that are trending? Are we training people to get on jobs? Black people should be pro-union. We should. You should control the workplace that you work in. You should have some say in the quality of life that you can live. When I was working in parks and recreation, I'm on the front lines of poverty every day. I had kids who were literally stealing cars because there was this myth that if you stole a car, you can get $2,000. I seriously don't have one kid just woke up and said, I'm gonna steal a car today to steal a car. It's like me and my mama about to get kicked out. She might have to go back and live with her ex-boyfriend who I can't stand. All of these things. My little sister said that he touched her, all the things, right? And it's like, I'm gonna go do this. So now I'm sitting in court as a character witness while they're trying to chop this kid up, and no one ever asked the question why. And so as we go to pull it full circle about when we are discerning the individuals that we put in these seats, what are the issues that matter most? And I think the work that we have to do, as Tony and Madison spoke to, is to make sure that we are looking at those. What is the joy that people want to have, and how are we participate, or how are we giving that? I see urban cities, Nashville, we do it too, that says we're so diverse, DEI and all this. No, like someone here, was it you, Tony, said we got to like increase our political education? You were spot on. A city is not diverse until you see it show up in their procurement policies. DBE are words that we put out there, but if you're only getting 1% of the contract, because usually your wherever your public dollars is where the wealth is built. That's how white people have built wealth. That's what they do with our public dollars. They transfer from public pots to private uses. That's how we be on Jeff Bezos, because he don't pay any taxes, right? With that said, you have to understand that 65% of Black people live in the South, I think, right? The LA, all those areas are becoming even more expensive to live in. Same for, I walked through Harlem and saw a bunch of Asian people. Like, where are the Black people at? I was looking for you, Denora.
I'm there. I'm still walking around in Harlem, I promise.
But with that said, it's like I hear the stories of like these things that are happening, right? And as people are moving down here, you said a key thing about power. The definition of power, and hear me closely, is organizing people and organized money. The definition of power is organized people and organizing money. If you don't think, how many of y'all have seen all these man versus women gender wars? It ain't white people in it, it's us in it, right? Now we're normalizing this language where you got Black people using a Christian narrative to like demonize the trans community, queer people, and all these things. Like, we gotta watch those are distractions to keep you in a place of desperation. Desperation causes concentrated poverty, and concentrated poverty is what is the best tool of oppression. And we have been the ones who have been the definition of that. We have got to move out of that, you know? And I think being more political savvy, which means having more, being intentional about political education, not in just the person we put in, but what are the issues that actually allow us to have the best quality of life and put joy forward, are the things that we are putting into the levers of power.
All right, I hope that I get to take a little bit of moderator privilege. I think I have only a few minutes left. I'm gonna come at you with a final question, because you've said a lot during this conversation, and I'm sad that it's coming to an end, because I'm fired up. I am going to be fervently consistent in everything I do going forward. I think I have been thus far, but I'm gonna make sure I stay on it. We have asked for a lot to transform our communities, to drive towards our liberation as people, as Black people, and especially Black women and Black femmes. How do we get there? Because we might be there, right? We have our sleeves rolled up. We're excited. We're consistent. We're making sure we're doing or giving or getting the political education. We're talking about the issues. But those who are investing in our communities, who are fueling and funding these movements, let's just be honest, what do they need to know? That's not about the reactionary. That's not about this one moment. What do we want them to leave this conversation knowing and thinking as they invest in these movements, as they fuel the fervently consistent, liberated democracy that we all want to live in? Anybody, and keep it short, because I don't want to get in any trouble, AKA they might cut my mic. No, I'm just kidding.
I think it starts with just taking the first step of accountability and acknowledging that there is a problem, and trying to understand how we can move forward through economic development. The money makes the world go round. Everyone knows that. We have to make sure that we're investing dollars into Black women, Black girls, and making sure that they're able to benefit on an equitable playing field. Equality is not enough.
If I had to say something to all of our philanthropists and all our funders out there, how do you want to be remembered in history? I want history to remember me well. And you have the ability to not just have history remember you through your charitable, givings. Be an ally, a real ally in this. Y'all have the accessibility to get in rooms that make big decisions that we can never get in. Sit in the room, get the information, and come back and strategize with us. You'll be amazed at the magic we can build together, not just with your money, but also with your accessibility and mind and privilege.
I would say, again, to philanthropists and investors, is that investing is about community building. when you're invested in something, like we have to think about what it means to invest. It's a deep relationship. And so when these organizations are doing work towards, power building, movement building, we need people funding at transformational levels. It's if it's there, if the funds are available, and we know the funds are available, we need investing on a level so that people are not worried about day-to-day expenses and that they can continue programming year round. Because again, it's not just about these targeted elections, is that we want to connect with communities around all issues and over a long period of time to create that sustained trust and that community buy-in. So year-round funding and transformational funding, so that people are not just getting off the ground, but that they're able to do programming that can produce real change within their communities.
I can't see a more inspiring note to end on. I want to thank each and every one of you, Tony, Madison, Odessa, for bringing it real on a Friday afternoon, Black Girl Freedom Week, talking about how our vote can actually liberate us. I am confident that the strategies and the tactics we discuss in this conversation are going to lead towards that. But I guess if Madison gets to have the final word, it's only if we're fervently consistent. And so I just want to appreciate all of you for bringing your best to this conversation, for bringing your real to this conversation and helping us set the stage for what's at stake in this year ahead. I will pass it back to our host to take us forward.
My name is Camille Thompson, and I'm the Executive Director of Collective Renaissance Georgia. Welcome to the world of CRG, where we're not just an organization, we're a movement. I'm thrilled to share with you what makes CRG unique. First off, CRG is all about young Black leadership, and we're proud to have a dynamic team of organizers spread across Georgia, passionately working to build a political power. Here's the exciting part. Did you know Georgia recently saw a significant increase in registered youth voters? At CRG, we're ensuring that Black girls are at the forefront of this movement, bringing their unique perspectives to enrich our democracy. Why is this so crucial? It's not just about the numbers. It's about making sure every voice is heard and every young person feels seen and valued. Work as an organizer in Georgia is special because we live in a state that was transformed through the energy and the resolve of young freedom fighters. It's inspiring to reflect on the legacy of movements that paved the way for us. Our work at CRG echoes the spirit of the civil rights movement, a movement that sought justice, equality, and empowerment. Similar to the activists who fought for civil rights, we too stand for justice. We're championing Black leadership, ensuring that the voices of young Black women and men are not just heard, but amplified. In the same way the civil rights movement fought against systemic inequalities, our mission at CRG is to address these inequalities head-on and foster a system that benefits everyone. Now, let's talk about the path to victory. It goes through Georgia, and you, the young people, are making it happen. In 2022, CRG hosted 6 focus groups, providing a safe space for young individuals to share their thoughts on voting. It was incredible. We knocked on 73,000 doors and sent over 1 million text messages, connecting with young Black people all across the state. Connecting with them through culturally competent and relevant voter education and engagement programs. By using non-traditional outreach methods, we gained valuable insights into young people's priorities, enabling us to connect these concerns to the world of civics and illustrate how they directly influence their lives and the lives of others. We reach young new voters using relational organizing tactics, such as popping up at annual HBCU football classics, hosting skating rink parties, local festivals, hair tours, hair salons, barbershops, and other local Black businesses. Our amazing team of canvassers, all under 30, is actively training the next generation of community organizers. We're not just talking about soft skills, we're talking about the hard skills needed to create real change in our communities. In 2023, we kept the energy alive by registering 70 voters every week. Our Get Out the Vote program was a hit. Phone banking, text banking, and hitting up in-person events. And the result? A tangible increase in voter turnout among young Black people in Georgia. You can find us in Savannah, Augusta, Macon, Albany, and Columbus. As my friends would say, CRG is outside. But our journey doesn't stop there. This year, we're setting our sights high, over 500,000 attempts to connect with new young voters using relational organizing tactics. Together, we can make it happen. CRG is more than just a voter engagement organization. We're invested in cultivating the next wave of proficient Black leaders across philanthropy, activism, and civic participation. We're not just handing out tools, we're crafting leaders who will make a lasting impact. Our success stories are the foundation for our future plans, and they've already led to a significant rise in civic participation among Black youth in Georgia. Let's take a moment to celebrate these achievements and recognize the incredible difference young people are making. Growing up, I had the privilege of hearing my grandmother talk about her work as an organizer. That's why I pursued a degree in economics and political science at Howard. It's why I worked as a student organizer with Blue Future and later as a presidential fellow at the DNC. It's why I returned to Atlanta, my hometown, to work at CRG, and I now have the privilege to join a core of passionate, dedicated, talented young people. Empowering them to be involved in civics is helping lead me to the future where I want to work in policy to create more progressive change. CRG has helped me understand how advocacy, organizing, and policy all work together. So, as we move forward, let's envision a future where empowered young voices, especially those of Black girls, shape a more inclusive society. Together, we're forging a path toward a future that celebrates diversity, amplifies voices, and creates positive change. Let's continue this incredible journey together.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for all of that. Wow. My favorite part of today was hearing our panelists speak about working with Black youth, especially young Black women in femmes, and preserving our democracy domestically and abroad, as we are and have always been the pillar of our political systems within our communities and federally. I also love seeing Camille and other Black women in Georgia leading grassroots organizations, engaging their communities in the ways they knew best to make a difference while ensuring to honor their ancestors and the long lineage of civil rights activists within our country. Again, thank you to all of our amazing panelists and speakers for sharing your experiences and expertise with me and our audience today. We have all learned so much, and I cannot wait to follow you all in your next endeavors. Now, for the moment that you've all been waiting for, here are our giveaway winners. Our winner today will be, drum roll please, Shireen from Washington, D.C. is today's winner. Congratulations to a fellow Washingtonian. Thank you again to our amazing ASL interpreters, Andrea and Brenda. Black Girl Freedom Week is coming to a close, but luckily for all of us, it's not over yet. Make sure that you tune in tomorrow for highlights for earlier conversations and the Let Out with Cedra Sebastian. Thank you for joining us today, and a happy Black Girl Freedom Week to you all.